adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Dr. Andrew Murrison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 6th of April last year, my constituent Jason Knight was cleaning the last window on the home of a regular customer in Westbury when he was electrocuted by 33,000 volts from an overhead cable. He was blown 7 feet across the garden, waking up on a patch of scorched grass with catastrophic injuries. Found by his customer, he was airlifted to Bristol in 12 minutes and placed in a coma. He woke up surrounded by his distraught family. He was very lucky to survive. But he was left with life-changing injuries. He has lost his left arm below the elbow, several toes, and a great deal of leg musculature. He has undergone over 20 sets of surgical intervention, suffered severe burns all over his body, and can walk or stand only with the utmost difficulty. And now he is losing his sight as a delayed effect of the electrocution. Jason is just 34 years old with 3 small children. He had started his own business that was growing and providing for his young family. He's a real doer, but his injuries are such that it is going to be extremely difficult for him to work again. What happened was this: 33,000 volts leapt without physical contact, about 2 metres from an overhead power cable to Jason's telescopic water-fed cleaning pole. The Health and Safety Executive made inquiries, of course, but concluded there was no breach of regulations that warranted investigation. Indeed, an HSE spokesperson told the BBC that the overhead power lines involved in this incident met national safety standards. In the UK, we tolerate high-tension power cables that are slung surprisingly close to commercial and residential buildings. But it wasn't the overhead power lines that failed Jason, it was the cleaning pole. As Jason said to his father John, shortly before he was taken to theatre to have his forearm amputated, "I don't understand, Dad. I bought an insulated pole." It should not have mattered that he was close to a power line because the pole should have been fully insulated, but it wasn't. Jason was using a telescopic pole that could extend and retract. The handle section at the bottom was insulated. The extended section was not. He was electrocuted when he reached up to retract the extended section. Before Jason came to see me, I have to say I knew very little about window cleaning. As he and John recounted the story, I assumed it was the water from the water-fed pole that was the culprit, since tap water, being impure, conducts electricity perfectly well. Jason and his dad put me right. Window cleaners, including Jason that day, use pure water, what is often called zero water. This kind of water has been filtered to remove all or nearly all dissolved solids so that it leaves no watermarks on windows after cleaning. Ordinary tap water does not have that property. At that moment, I realised why my own attempts at window cleaning at home invariably left the glass looking worse. The crucial point is this: pure water is non-conductive. So the water in Jason's pole was not the culprit. What caused this accident was inadequate insulation in a tool designed to be used at height, even in proximity to overhead power lines. This is not a new, unforeseeable risk. The first water-fed poles developed in the United States in the 1950s were made entirely of aluminium. When window cleaners started to be electrocuted, the manufacturers simply slapped on some warning labels. At that time, the greatest hazard to window cleaners in Britain was falling off ladders. But when pole technology crossed the pond in the 1990s, its safety issues came with it. One British manufacturer, Craig Mawlam, head of Ionic Systems in Swindon, whose expertise I have drawn on extensively, recognised that danger early. He sought out non-conductive materials, developing composite glass fibre and carbon fibre poles. He prioritised insulation in the handle and worked with the HSE to introduce training and guidance as the industry moved away from ladders and towards working from terra firma. But critically, Madam Deputy Speaker, this was voluntary, not required. There was and remains no mandatory British standard governing the electrical insulation of telescopic cleaning poles.
Delighted.
Jim Shannon.
Can I commend the Honourable Member for South West Wiltshire for bringing this forward? I was just sitting here and I was just thinking to myself, Madam Deputy Speaker, years ago, I live on a farm. Years ago, farmers weren't aware of the telescopic, of their hydraulic lifts and touching cables. They weren't aware of falling off, the warnings of falling off roofs. And there was a campaign started to ensure that farmers took more care of themselves and made sure they followed a health and safety regulation. The Honourable Gentleman, and I think of his constituent, and my sympathies and my concerns and my thoughts are with him, and as he deals with the life that he's now having to deal with. Does the Honourable Gentleman feel the campaign is necessary now for those who are involved in the workplace safety and water-fed poles in the window cleaning industry, same as it was for the farmers many years ago, where today farms are very safety conscious?
The Honourable Gentleman is quite right, and occupations that are not predictable are particularly dangerous. So agriculture is clearly one, construction would be another, and window cleaning plainly is another one. And of course, in the window cleaning industry, as its association will say, is a particular issue because very often people are essentially start-ups. They're very often one-man bands, usually men, Madam Deputy Speaker. They don't necessarily have training. They're probably not aware, which is why it's so important to make the changes that I'm suggesting we make, so that we engineer out the problem, so that people are not exposed to the hazards that I have described and which sadly Jason has fallen victim to. The omission of any recognition of the issue in British standards really matters more now than it ever has, because the poles I have described are no longer specialist equipment. They're used everywhere. They're used on residential streets below overhead cables. They're used near rail infrastructure. They're used in airports. They're used in hospitals, schools and industrial sites. They're used not just for window cleaning, but increasingly for solar panel cleaning, gutter clearing, roof treatment, camera inspections and building maintenance. They are available online relatively inexpensively, and they're available for use by amateurs and DIYers. And they are increasingly imported cheaply from overseas, especially China, meeting no enforceable UK electrical safety standards at all. In 2011, a British standard was published that could have changed everything, and that's BS 8020. This standard governs insulating hand tools used near live electrical conductors up to 1,000 volts. It requires rigorous construction standards. It requires batch testing at 10,000 volts, providing a 10-to-1 safety margin. It mandates clear marking and verification. As an example, it covers narrow-bladed shovels that might be used close to where underground cables could be. They are the ones that builders, merchants or DIY shop with plastic or yellow-orange sections in the shaft or handle, typically. Some pole manufacturers chose to apply British Standard 8020 to the handle section of their poles. Since 2017, at least one supplier has done so as a matter of course, Ionic Systems in Swindon, Wiltshire. But here lies a problem. BS 8020 is not mandatory for cleaning poles, and it does not require insulation of the section immediately above the handle. That is why Jason Knight was injured. Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK remained free of fatal water-fed pole electrocutions until 2022. Then, in that single year, 2 window cleaners were killed whilst working at residential properties. In 2024, Jason was very lucky to survive. Window cleaners now account for a significant proportion of overhead power line electrocutions. Yet, unlike agriculture, construction or scaffolding, there is no targeted awareness campaign, no mandatory training requirement, and no enforced equipment standards for this trade. And that's why I brought this matter to the House. The Federation of Window Cleaners, the Health and Safety Executive, the British Standards Institute, and representatives of the energy networks have begun discussions on what to do. Some suppliers have engaged constructively, others have refused entirely. The manufacturer of the pole Jason was using when he was electrocuted claims its products are tested to 5,000 volts without reference to any recognised standard. That figure is arbitrary, it is meaningless, without methodology, certification or context. A pole tested informally to 5,000 volts may be vastly less safe than one certified to British standard 8020 to 1,000 volts, but actually good for 10,000 volts with a 10-to-1 safety margin. Yet to a sole trader or DIYer, choosing equipment online, the higher number sounds the more reassuring. That is exactly why British standards exist. That is exactly why we need one for telescopic water-fed poles. Madam Deputy Speaker, this debate is not about banning water-fed poles. They have made the industry safer because they have reduced the need to use ladders and to work at height. Nor is it about blaming workers, many of whom are sole traders operating on tight margins without access to formal training or industry bodies. This debate is about designing danger out of tools in the first place, not just warning people to be careful while continuing to sell suboptimal equipment. The remedy is simple, proportionate, cheap and immediately available. First, British Standard 8020 should be amended or extended to cover telescopic cleaning poles explicitly and to require that both the handle and the first telescopic section above it meet the insulation standard and are marked accordingly. That single change would ensure that an operator's hands remain on verifiably insulated material throughout normal raising, lowering and operation of the pole. It would create a safe clearance of 3 to 4 metres in most real-world situations. Second, compliance with this standard should be mandatory, whether through regulation, conditions attached to limited liability insurance, or procurement requirements imposed by major building occupiers. It is worth admitting that products would become about 70 grams heavier and very slightly less rigid, but that is completely tolerable. On the flip side, glass fibre insulation is in fact cheaper than the carbon fibre it would replace. I'm pleased to say that the British Standards Institute, after a bit of encouragement, has seen the merit of the case. Its Director General, Scott Stedman, kindly wrote to me earlier this month to say that he is working up proposals that will determine if there will be an amendment to the relevant British standards, drawing from the guidance published by the British Window Cleaning Association. However, I remain concerned that the right British standard is amended. BS 8020 is an equipment-based British standard. It appears to me to be the more appropriate target, rather than the BSI's current suggestion, which is BS 8213, a British standard which deals largely with safe systems of work. And it could be, of course, that both standards need to be amended. Nevertheless, Mr. Stedman's news is most welcome, as is his assurance that a draft of the proposed changes will be published for public consultation in accordance with his institute's normal practice. Madam Deputy Speaker, Britain has led the world in industrial safety by setting clear, enforceable standards. Given British manufacturers' global exports, a UK standard in this could well become an international benchmark, saving lives, saving limbs, saving livelihoods across the world. Jason Knight, his father John, and Craig Mawlam are not campaigners by choice. They have become campaigners because they don't want what happened to Jason to happen to others, and I pay tribute to them today. We cannot accept a system in which warning labels are seen as a substitute for a simple engineering solution that removes risk at source. I feel sure that the Minister will agree with all this, and I hope he will use his good offices to encourage the BSI and the HSE to bring forward the changes I have outlined as quickly as possible.